Hi, if you find this podcast helpful, you may enjoy my new audiobook, You Teach the Machines, AI on Your Terms, out wherever you get audiobooks. That's You Teach the Machines, AI on Your Terms by me, Jeff Pennington.
Where, oh, where are you tonight? Why did you leave me in red on my phone? I searched the world over and thought I found true love. You met an AI and poof, you was gone. There ones and zeros, vectors and scalars. What do you see in that machine? I gave you my heart, my warmth, and Snapchat. You chose a robot, now I'm alone.
I think we need to record this on video. That's all I can say.
Dude, I think I'm really glad that you enjoyed the hype music for You Teach the Machines.
The theme song is AI generated.
Yes, we used we used a service called Udio. I wrote the lyrics and then spent about an hour like tweaking parameters in blindly. Like this was me stumbling around in the dark, but tweaking parameters to get to that. So if you wanted hype music for your podcast, you could do the same.
That is amazing. I mean, I've used the same music for 6 years. I think people might be like, wait, what? But I, you know what? I actually may consider it because I am quite envious of some people's hype music, and this one is very, very cool. And if you do keep the beginning of this,
oh yeah, we will.
I just want to tell folks who, we didn't do a video recording of this, but we should have. We were all dancing on screen. And it was quite fun.
Yes.
I was not planning for it, but now I'm happy. I was already happy to talk to you guys, and now we were dancing. I agree. Dancing really does help.
It's a good endorphin rush.
It does. It always helps. So that was our preamble. We'll do the official kickoff now. Hello, welcome, listeners, to You Teach the Machines. I am Jeff Pennington, and I am joined by my co-host,
MJ Pennington.
And we are joined together by our guest and new friend and colleague,
Georgie Kovacs.
Welcome, Georgie. So
thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you for joining.
You.
MJ and I met Georgie at a strategy summit for a venture accelerator, a startup accelerator called Springboard Enterprises about 3 weeks ago. And we found Georgie to be a very thoughtful and impactful expert in that context. And then come to find out, Georgie spent 20 years in significant high-level roles at major companies like Pfizer and IQVIA, which I'm very curious about and I may ask you about, before she launched out on her own as a full-time consultant, but especially an advocate for patient-centered care. And she founded FemPower Health, which is both your practice, your platform, and your podcast, FemPower Health, and uses that to really cut through the confusion and the unfortunate stigma surrounding women's health issues. And in your consulting practice, you really apply all that deep industry knowledge that you gained working for all of these monster health sector companies to advise those companies, maybe others, and startups on how to approach women's health ethically from a business and product standpoint. And from our discussion and from doing some background reading on you, you really are driven to ensure that women's health products meet patient needs first and foremost. You're a doer, and you are scaling your impact and really working to help women get better outcomes from this is not on video, like our dancing wasn't on video, but I'm going to throw up really big air quotes and say, getting better outcomes from a complex healthcare system. And I'm going to put system in air quotes also. So welcome, Georgie. Anything else to add?
No, my goodness. I would like to listen to that when I'm having a rough day.
Little hype up for you.
Yeah, there we go.
And I met Georgie at the summit and we had a chance to chat. I won't say we had a full bore conversation, but Mary Jane, you did. Could you share a bit of what you took away from that conversation with Georgie?
Yeah, I think that something that struck me from our conversation that I've thought about since we had it was how healthcare is a $1 trillion business, right? It's this huge part of our economy, and in a lot of ways operates the same way that other businesses do, with competition, even when it comes to research. But there's this other dimension to the business that is sort of the deep emotional impact that healthcare and health issues have on people. So it's not just the product of whatever typical business would be, but it's like the impact on somebody's mental health and the way that they experience the world based on how they experience the healthcare system. And so we talked a little bit about how, as a business, healthcare tends to operate in these silos where independent researchers are working on sort of competing with each other. But maybe when it comes to like the emotional impact of healthcare, breaking down those silos and trying to get some more collaboration could improve patient care. But then also the fact that patients who have been mistreated by the system or had negative healthcare experiences maybe are not willing to come back and contribute to future progress, work with the doctors that did not give them the care that they deserved, work with research systems that maybe failed them. And so it's sort of this like it's hard to get feedback. It's hard to get collaboration in the way that like maybe a more consumer-based industry would work, where you could get feedback on a negative customer experience because that's not quite as deeply personal and emotional.
Yes. I mean, it's the healthcare system is incredibly complex, as you mentioned at the beginning, Jeff. As a consultant, having worked at these monster companies, right? One of the things I've noticed is it's really incentives and structures that drive all behavior, and the stakeholders involved drive how all of that works. I'll give you a concrete example of how this can work at a company, and then I'll explain how it plays out in healthcare. Imagine a company that has an incentive compensation system where if you sell $1 million worth of business and you will always get 10% of it, what are you going to do? Sell more. Now, if you work with other people, you get less of that pie. Now, you may do the math and think in your head, well, if we all collaborate, we can hopefully sell more in the end. But if the incentives isn't there to even make you think about collaboration, unless on your own you come up with that idea, you may not work with people. So you're not going to be basically a solopreneur at an organization. What's interesting is now if this organization changes it where there's a cap on your incentive compensation, there's the other side now, which is now it's like, well, why bother selling that much? So it kind of mentally changes your behavior. And by the way, if you're incentivized where you get 10% of anything you sell, you're going to sell anything because you make money. So there's the quality impact and then the effort to do more impact just by changing incentive compensation, right? And if you're not structured to work as teams, you will never do that, right? Because you're now, so that's like a very clear way of how there's an incentive and structure that and it's not on purpose, right? It's just how it works.
Right.
So imagine this healthcare system where payers, the insurance companies, are incentivized to, make sure that you're not expensive by being too sick. Then you have doctors, because now they're part of these larger practices. There's a cap on, how much you can do for procedures and things like that. So what do? You now have to see more patients. And so there's always a cut. There's always finite things. And so if you have, health insurance companies that want to limit the things that they're having to pay for, doctors who have less time to see you, because now that is the only way to make money, who loses in the end? The patient. And it's not to say none of them care about you, but because healthcare is a business and there are these, key performance indicators, so to speak, in the end, this is what happens, even though no one wanted it to, because no one is above that to say, like you have in the UK, right? And so because it's all fragmented, this is the impact.
Yeah.
It comes from the early 1900s, a saying, no margin, no mission. And that plays out like you described over and over and over again in the healthcare industry. I'll share a story about AI in healthcare, since this is ostensibly an AI podcast, but we're currently renegotiating that. It's more of a tech and society, Mary Jane.
Tech and society.
And society. Okay.
Yeah.
So I had my first colonoscopy a few years ago, and I it's a long, actually ridiculous story, which I won't go through completely, but it involved the anesthesiologist tapping his watch to get the GI doc to stop talking to me about AI while I was on the table. Moving on from there, it turns out that this practice has a Medtronic system called GI Genius in place. And I asked during my conversation with the doc in the recovery cubicle, hey, well, how do you pay for this AI system that he uses to find more polyps, to increase his adenoma detection rate? And he said, increased pathology revenue. So to your point about incentives, right? Money sets priorities. His priority is to find more polyps and ship them out and bill for the pathology. And his practice probably sends out to another lab, but charges margin on top of that. And, that in the context of AI augmented care is just the reality of it. If I can ask Georgie, you've sort of taken a big step into, over many years now, advocating for patients in this system. How do you see the patient advocacy community getting traction to sort of modify or change these sorts of incentives to better health outcome, to get better health outcomes?
Wow. First, I just want to add something based on what you said, and then I will answer your question. So AI with these doctors, this is amazing, but here's one thing I want everyone to know, especially if they are a cis female patient, which is that, and I did an episode on this on my podcast talking to an AI expert, is I want folks to understand that if the AI does not take into account data specific to women, I want everyone to understand most of research is a male default. And the further away we get with continuing to build AI models without making sure there are data sets that are differentiated for men versus women and that we know how to query, these AI tools are going to be impacted. So I just wanted to say that since you brought up the doctor's office.
And women's health, which is historically left behind in the research industry, that gap just widens even more, right?
Right.
If research is being driven by AI, which is driven by data, which is male-centric, women's health stays in the dust.
Yep.
Yeah.
And one thing I do want to do is I noticed in this women's health community, and this is actually something that's incredibly important to me. And in everything I communicate, I really try to monitor the lens in which I talk about things, is I don't ever want the tone of conversations to be men are jerks, rah, rah women. So to say it from a very fact-based perspective, in 1993 was the Health Revitalization Act, or just maybe it was called the NIH Revitalization Act. That was when they started to mandate women partake in clinical trials. 1993.
Wow.
And I recently moderated a session on women's brain health at the Museum of Science. And one of the people on the panel is the chief science officer for Sage Therapeutics that brought out the postpartum depression drug, the first of its kind. And even there, we had a whole conversation around how difficult, even with that mandate, it is still to make sure clinical trials are powered for gender differences, because not even
enrolled, but just designed, powered as part of the study design.
Because I want people to appreciate that when you're running a clinical trial to get FDA approval, you need to have certain endpoints, and you kind of have to, again, because it's a business, you have to bank on where is the greatest likelihood to be able to get FDA approval.
Yeah.
And so you have to create the endpoints in order to ensure that will happen. And so there are only so many things you can power clinical trials to. So I just want people from a very fact-based perspective to understand this. So if those things aren't studied, our databases have that which has been, which feeds AI, et cetera.
So may I add to that?
Please.
In my male voice, my cis male voice. So there are women in my life who are very significantly affected by premenstrual dysphoria disorder. MJ is not one of them, thankfully. And at one point a few years ago, I was really stewing on the fact that this was underdiagnosed and not well understood and treated with the throes of the dart, basically, using psychoactive medications that are typically indicated for depression or anxiety or other psych diagnoses. I found one randomized controlled trial studying the effect of a depression med in PMDD, one in NIH Reporter, which is a big public database where you can see all of the federally funded, all the publications for all the federally funded work, and then a lot of work that's not federally funded as well. And then I did a brief search. I didn't count, but there were dozens of RCTs, randomized controlled trials for erectile dysfunction.
Yep.
So,
and that's kind of how it works. And look, it is you have to put more thought into doing trials for women. Like even endometriosis, it impacts, like, I think it's 900 million women around the world? I mean, it's a crazy, crazy number. And because you can have multiple conditions, enrollment is kind of challenging. So there's a challenging aspect to it, but then there's like, people may just not think of it. And then it's also hard to get funding. So it's really complex. I know that there has been a whole history with, all of these horrible things that have happened to women. And I think what's happening now is we're trying to unravel it. Yes, there are not so wonderful people out there in the world, but I don't think people wake up to say, how do we make sure we don't study women? We just need more people who think about it and then who push the needle and say, let's ask better questions because it can be done. Let's just try harder. That's really what I'm seeing as the gap. Again, not at all diminishing horrible experiences women are having, gaslighting, all of that stuff that exists. But I really think we're now at a stage of needing to undo and needing more people to ask the right questions and try harder.
Yeah.
I have a question. Georgie, in your work, have you encountered any of the AI-enabled trial screening and enrollment services or products that are being marketed? The extent to which they're being implemented it's still pretty early days.
I've seen them, but I don't know behind the scenes how effectively they are working because I think it really, so from what I am seeing is there are tools because of what they're doing. They have patients who they could get enrolled in trials, but then it's people needing to know that exists. So even though all of these things exist, it's the matching. Yeah. And that I think is what is going to be tough. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm building an endometriosis working group. I need to say it differently because it's built. I guess I am building it. So what I've done now is an initial survey to understand all the players in this space. And going back to the question we still haven't answered, which is the patients. Endometriosis is one of my favorite examples of everything gone wrong in healthcare for women. So you have one of the most powerful advocates I've ever seen. They know this disease better than most of their doctors. Yet we still don't really know why women get it. We still don't have, there's just a lot that we don't know that we should in order to be successful. And so you have a lot of advocates who are all doing their small thing, but there isn't one central organizer, right? When I did this assessment, so what can advocates do? It's tough because people are doing it. Again, it's the joined forces. And with everything in the survey that I did, it was interesting. There's a person who said they have this thing that they can offer. And then there's another person who said, here's this thing I need. And it's the same thing. But what I want to be clear, this is not, let's just get a matchmaker. It's reestablishing a system with someone who's guiding it forward. So whether it's, the patients that you asked me about earlier or anything else, and it takes a big effort to be able to do it. So, to all of these things you're asking, it's great they exist.
Yeah.
Who connects it?
Yeah. I'll back up a step from the AI screening and enrollment and recruiting tools, because talking about tools in these complex systems is always very dissatisfying and sort of backward to data. So I come from a pediatric health background, 17 years at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, working on data and AI. So I'm very familiar with the rare disease communities that are out there where patient advocates, patient family advocates will band together to effectively attract attention to a disease that doesn't have a high incidence. It doesn't affect that many children in the US or worldwide. And sometimes those rare disease advocates try and put a finger or a hand on the scale to rebalance the situation by aggregating and collecting data that can then be used. So you're through your survey, you're establishing the sort of shape and character and nature of this community. That's now an asset, a resource that could be deployed. How do you see that playing out? The data that you're collecting. What are your hopes and dreams for it?
Well, my hopes and dreams are really to take endometriosis from where it is today to where we are with breast cancer. Now, there's a long ways to go because it's really interesting. I did a lot of research on this because I'm actually writing a book, and I'm really fascinated by how we are getting to where we are today. And, even with breast cancer, there are some who criticize some of the efforts because the focus is on, only certain aspects. But what about metastatic breast cancer? What about survivors of metastatic breast cancer? So there's a lot, things that could be improved, but nonetheless, wow, from where it was even like 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so my vision is to do that, but I'm mapping it out. So right now I'm going to be sharing the results with key stakeholders, and I have a whole plan, and I will be raising funds to be able to do the effort. Because like I said, this is not a simple, let me put up a website and people can just match with each other. That will not work. I've done this a long time for organizations, and you still need a leader. And so it's my plan. There's different phases to it. And long term, it'll take like probably 5 to 10 years to really get it to where it needs to be. But I definitely have plans in place that I'll be sharing with key stakeholders in the endometriosis space. And so far I've had support. Like people do agree we need a strategic plan and someone who's like managing it centrally because things exist. They're just fragmented all over the world. And so we'll see, but I think we can do it.
So like establishing sort of like a central working group for endometriosis, like almost like representing the disease and the way that it exists in healthcare, in patients, in advocates, sort of like centralizing, I guess, resources. Like what does it look like? So it's bringing together people that are working on endometriosis, people who have experienced endometriosis, providers, systems, and then trying to sort of create like a general strategic plan moving forward, like what needs to happen. What does it look like to like form a plan moving forward? It's such a broad here's this disease, how do we solve it? Like
first, I tell everyone, please do not think that I'm coming here saying I'm a magician with a magic wand. It's not at all the case. I'm not making promises, but I'm good at doing this stuff, and I know the community well, and so I'm hoping I can be successful. I know many have tried, but I'll give you an example. So here, I had spoken with the NIH and I said, does something exist where, let's say people want funding and we want to prioritize the funding? Do we look at, even if it's outside of endo, like just generally, what is the disease burden? Mm-hmm. What is the economic impact? And what have we researched already? What do we not yet know? And based on that, prioritize funding. That does not exist. Even with endometriosis, we don't, it's not like there's a central hub to say, this is what we know, this is what we don't. And even things like, and this is now just research. So each country is going to have their own healthcare system with its own issues. Mm-hmm. Diagnosing endo, not a lot of experts truly know how to do it because the true experts were born out of surgery, and OBGYNs don't get a lot of training in all the countries on endo. So you have the first line of defense with little training, and the experts are the last resort. And so it's so wonky.
Wow.
And go ahead.
Wow. I get it, because if the surgeons are the ones that understand, quote unquote, the disease, they understand it at the level of like gross anatomy, pathology, and the sort of ultimate attempt to intervene and treat, like after so much has already gone haywire.
Right. Yeah.
So for anyone who is listening to this to say, OBGYNs can't do surgery, I just want to make a clarification point. There are two methodologies. There's ablation and excision. So ablation is a 45-minute procedure, and excision could take 10 hours, depending on how deeply infiltrated the endometriosis is. to do excision, those surgeons had to go through a whole different program, including finding specialists who know endo and work with them to learn how to do the surgery properly. General OBGYN surgeons are trained on ablation. And so even if an OBGYN is doing the surgery, it may not, like the endo community is saying, no ablations, please. Only excisions. That's how we do surgery. And so that, I just want to add that point. So
the patient,
yes,
the patient community, when you say that the community?
Just anyone who is listening to this, yes, the patient community and the clinicians who are true experts in endometriosis
Say
this is what
excisions.
they say.
Right.
Only
So
excision.
anybody that's listening, no ablations.
So then
Please.
the surgical treatment takes both surgical expertise and the ability to perform an excision, which is not necessarily like standard for all OBGYNs, but then also the expertise to identify and diagnose endometriosis, which all expert surgeons might not have.
Correct. Right? Yeah. And yes. And, I am sure that many will debate me on the nuances, and I wouldn't disagree with anyone because there's a million nuances within that.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, that is the theme, which is why it's so difficult.
In your survey, has the topic of biobanking or, germline DNA sample collection come up?
Yes. So there is a group that has put together what the standards should be for the biobank. But the question is, does everyone know about those standards? And is anyone holding them accountable? It's not like there's a seal of approval process in place. So again, I go back to, it's great if something exists, but if it's not embedded into a system, like even I want folks to understand the latest data, and hopefully with AI and things like that, this will change. But even if there are medical guidelines put in place, it can take 7 to 10 years before practice changes.
Yeah. What you're describing is the dissemination, the standardization, and then dissemination of clinical best practices, professional society governed or even regulatory body governed, do this, don't do that, or stop doing this, stop doing ablations and only excisions.
Right.
And so in the context of biobanking, and I'll just
Can you give a brief spiel about biobanking, please?
I was about to. Nice.
Oh, perfect.
Nice prompt here.
Thank you.
So when you're studying a complex disease that has really, and I'm going to go learn a lot more about endo after this conversation, but that has there isn't a sort of smoking gun for how it develops, where it comes from, how it progresses, why one case may be different than another, those sorts of things. Often the biological clues that can lead you along different lines of investigation can come from, pieces of tissue, from blood, from what is removed during an excision, from healthy tissue nearby, those sorts of things. And so once those tissues are collected, for a research purpose, they are, quote, banked. So they're stored for future use by researchers who may not even at this point know what questions they're going to ask, but that piece of tissue, when frozen and preserved for, potentially decades, is available to a research community. New questions can be answered, new types of data can be generated from the biospecimen, because that's really what these tissue samples in freezers are. They are waiting to be turned into data. And
Yep.
So I was asking about that because it's for complex diseases, even simple diseases, it's often sort of a central pillar of enabling community-based research, right? If there's a community biobank, then that multiple groups, researchers can access it, it becomes a hub for R&D. And since this is ostensibly an AI podcast, or maybe that's why people are showing up, there are really, really exciting new analytical methods that are emerging around analysis and interpretation of biological data that are being driven by machine learning and AI models. These are almost certainly not going to provide like the smoking gun answer, but they're going to hopefully speed up the rate of discovery and ruling out what we thought might be the reason for that people get endo, and being able to quickly focus on something else and speeding things up. So that's where I'm coming from with biobanking.
Got it.
Well, can I add something though? Again, back to the system, we need samples. And I know an organization in the UK who is looking for anywhere between 1,000 and 5,000. So it's not like millions. I just can't remember the exact number off the top of my head. It might be 1,000 because I think the organization's called Endo 1,000, and they're struggling to get the samples.
Even at the level of 1,000. Okay. And
Wow.
that the system comes in again because in a clinical, surgical, and pathology practice, the excision may go to, the gross anatomy, gross pathology lab for characterization for the ultimate report, the outcome, of the surgery. Yes, it was removed, but we studied what was removed and we can say X, Y, and Z about it. When that tissue goes to the pathology lab, it goes to the pathology lab for clinical purposes, which are very standardized, typically pretty old school. And that piece of tissue might get like immediately dropped in a jar of formalin or formaldehyde, right? Which then basically destroys it for any purpose other than that immediate clinical pathology evaluation.
Yep.
And so inserting a biobanking like branch into that is disruptive, right? And who's going to pay for it? What's the incentive, right? So, I'm not surprised that even at the level of 1,000, that biobank is having a hard time.
But this is why, so when you were asking earlier, what is this working group going to do? I mean, that's what needs to be done. We need funding. Yeah. And I'm hoping, because it is such a passionate community and that there is a lot of focus and that there are more funders looking at women's health, that we can do it. But this just goes to show how complex, because if you take a biobank, it's like, okay, great. We have standards. Okay. Who's going to donate? Who's going to research? What's the process? Like, how will all that work? And you're doing it around the globe. Right. And each country has their own, right?
Yeah. So, each clinic in each country. I mean,
yes.
And, just it's always important to talk about the sort of weight of the challenges in these situations. I also really appreciate your style, which is like, okay, those are the challenges. How do we move forward? The cancer community, broadly stated, and there's a lot of different kinds of cancer, really struggle with this issue of biobanking. It's not something that outside of a couple of countries with national health systems is tackled in a systematic way. And I'll just give a sort of another piece of context for AI for you, Mary Jane. A big part of the quote unquote AI strategy, backed up by a big part of the quote unquote data strategy at CHOP, is a biobanking strategy, because when you have the samples, then you can generate data, then you can use regular old statistics or even, super fancy AI stuff. So it's I'll sort of make a plea to listeners that when you hear hype about how AI is going to speed things up, or AI is going to do this, or AI is going to do that, that the reality is that AI is nothing without a unique and novel data set, and that doesn't come easily. So the fact that you're doing a survey to understand the disease, its presentation in the community, is it's like, we'll just do a survey. No, this is an incredible starting point, right?
Yeah.
Because we are ostensibly an AI podcast, I have sort of a more AI directed question. So a lot of our optimism that we've reached throughout our conversations on this podcast.
We've reached optimism, Mary Jane?
I think we've reached some optimism when it comes to AI, is the potential that AI has to scale and sort of benefit communities or maybe small businesses that traditionally get left in the dust when there's a lack of capital, a lack of human resources, a lack of experts to, like a small company can't hire 12 bioinformaticians, right, to help with things that they're trying to accomplish. So looking at women's health as sort of a historically underfunded, maybe underprioritized field of healthcare, is there anything that you are hearing about or that you're excited about with AI where AI could potentially be used to scale the expertise and knowledge of the few people that maybe are experts in specific women's health problems that are not industry-wide, or methods or techniques, things like that? Because when it comes to rural healthcare, for example, AI has this incredible potential to scale knowledge of highly specialized people who've trained maybe in big cities to apply that knowledge to rural communities. In women's health, maybe we scale the knowledge and the work of one researcher to be a team of 5. And that means, in theory, there's more resources being put towards that sort of research. Just curious your thoughts.
So I would say that I would pose to anyone listening to this to ask themselves that question. Because like I said earlier, we just need people to pause and think differently. And I'm not sure where we're quite at a point where, like, I can't come up with a specific idea, because everything that comes to my mind right now is health technology. So what I'm seeing very common now, and we're seeing it in all of healthcare, is just being able to measure more about our bodies, to have greater awareness. And to me, that's been the biggest change, is because, see, the thing in women's health that's very unique is, from a patient perspective, we wait until we get help. We prioritize everyone else's needs but our own. And yet we complain about the healthcare system. So I would like to challenge women. I don't disagree. We have a tough healthcare system, but are we actually trying? So I will say that, so for those who are, I'm sorry you're suffering, but if you're not and you're frustrated, I would look in the mirror and say, am I really trying to help myself? Sorry to be so direct, but I think it's an important thing we need to face.
Yeah.
But because we have all these wearables, it is giving us information. And so to me, that's the big change. And I would say they're probably layering in lots of AI. But again, what I'm seeing is the connectivity. So one person may have an amazing tool, but another startup is going to, if that's not their business priority, they're not going to use it.
Right.
And so right now, the interconnectivity is all the partnerships that are happening with the wearables and other companies, as long as there's a reason for said partnership. So there's a lot more data sharing, and that is where AI will hopefully help. But again, we need to make sure all of this AI is programmed to differentiate male versus cis male, cis female, so that we make sure we're better understanding healthcare.
Yeah. Quick story about that. This isn't cis male versus cis female, but I worked extensively on a study to predict emotional outbursts in nonverbal autistic children. And this was a while ago, before the Apple Watch really took off. We had Fitbits and Fitbit competitors as wearables that could detect heart rate. Thankfully, we had hired an intern with brown skin, not particularly thinking about this case, but she was tasked with generating baseline benchmark data using all the different wearable devices we had. And she found out that, the version of the Fitbit that we had was really wonky compared to the other devices from other manufacturers. And I am calling out Fitbit on this. So it was because she had different pigment in her skin, and the photo sensor that these devices used got wonky. So this stuff happens all the friggin' time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why it's important to have more people in the room, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Diverse in
people.
so many ways, genders, just backgrounds, the way they think. And so, and it's really interesting, because I never really thought about it until we're having this conversation. Like, AI is really exciting, but the more you and I are talking, the more it's so clear that it works in pockets, but the humans still need, like, and for anyone who's afraid that humans are going to go away, like, you can see here, we can't, because we're simply, like, the world is going to completely transform, but we need the humans there still. Because, I mean, even now, like in the past year, I use AI a lot for efficiency. It's gotten better, but oh my goodness, do I have to correct it still a ton. And just imagine, the more it's in charge of, so to speak, meaning the broader its capability, if we're still not fixing the underlying, forget about it.
And if AI is only improving based on the data that it's being fed, but there's no human in the room to point out, hey, this skin has different pigment, and so the results are looking off, or this data set is not differentiating between cis male and cis female, and so our results are different. Like, the AI isn't in the world. It's not recognizing those differences and saying the data is wrong, so the answers are wrong. It's just whatever answer it gets from the data it's fed.
Yeah. I'm going to try and give the call out that you made earlier to the listener who could be asking, well, what could I do? I'll say definitely follow Georgie and listen to her podcast, FemPower Health. Follow her on LinkedIn, because she's going to end up 5 years, hopefully not 10, creating opportunities for you to contribute potentially with your own personal data or blood sample or cheek swab. And that's how we get a better outcome from any technology. It's with that kind of activated participation, specific participation. And you're launching an initiative, a program, a hub for endometriosis that will create a stewardship of these resources globally, and that's a big deal. Your ambition is global, and I think that's worth applauding, because from the get-go, that with that ambition, there are fewer barriers to collecting an unbiased data set, for example, instead of working on the wealthy Upper East Side women, right? Shout out, love you, wealthy Upper East Side women, and also you're going to get a better health outcome if Georgie and the endo work group are able to collect data and garner participation from women in South Asia. So,
well, let's clarify. I am so early. So I am now publishing the report that I'm getting feedback on. Then I'll publish it, and then I have to raise money. So if I can't raise money, because you can imagine how much it's going to take to do this, it will be stalled until I can raise money. And so fingers crossed.
Yeah, just as a frame of reference, the biobank and the combined annual budget of the biobank and data program for all diseases at CHOP was north of somewhere between $10 and $20 million a year, right? It's not public information, so I'm not going to give a specific number, but it takes a lot to do this. Yeah. And that's just for one institution.
Yeah. So I don't know if I wanted to know that number was that big, but again, my mission is the corralling, and I'm hoping there will be quote unquote businesses that evolve out of it that people would fund, because that would be incentivizing, right, for people. So
well, that's hugely important.
Yeah.
Nothing actually gets into patient care unless it goes through commercialization.
Yeah. So we'll see.
We may be coming up on time.
Yes.
I want to be sensitive to that. Do you have any other questions, Mary Jane?
No, I was just gonna put out a time flag.
We are synced up. This is great. All right,
good.
Georgie, do you have anything else you want to add? And I definitely want to plug FemPower Health, your podcast. I was listening this morning to episode on PMDD, which was chock full of information. What your period tells you about what's going on, not just with PMDD, but perimenopause, menopause. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, it's and also follow my newsletter, because I send it out once a week, no more than once a week unless something comes up. And on social media, I'm mostly active on Instagram and TikTok. Oddly enough, TikTok, I get more interaction. On Instagram, I think people just scroll by. No matter how much I say, give me comments, I want feedback. Nope, they do it on TikTok.
Good to know. And we'll put
the algorithm to work.
We'll put links to all of this in the show notes, which you'll be able to find on youteachthemachines.com.
There we go. Well, no, thank you for this opportunity. And this was a really, really fun conversation. It made me think as well. And just, I don't know, I guess I realized, wow, we still have a long ways to go with AI. So
yeah, dude. And that's the fiction that we're being sold by the big AI companies right now, that somehow they're going to provide the Uber one AI to rule them all.
It's all just going to happen.
No,
it's going to take a lot of work.
Those big brittle companies won't be the winners.
I will just add one random thing that I don't know why it's coming to me, but I'm just going to say it. For anyone, if you're doing something really specific, build a GPT. So I use ChatGPT, but build a GPT. It's so much better than if you just keep a chat and it gets to know you. It does a much better job if you create a GPT for that specific thing.
This is what you and I had a chat about. We didn't get into a deep conversation, but you're like, yeah, I created a GPT for this. I created a GPT for that. I have yet to create a GPT, so I've got to go do that.
It is worth it.
Okay.
We got to go do that.
It's worth it.
All right.
Go do that.
And we'll report back. All right.
Thank you so much for having a conversation with us today.
Oh, my smoke alarm's going off.
Oh, no.
It's my candle.
We'll leave this in the blooper reel.
Okay.
Georgie, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you spending time with us.
Thank you.
So good to have
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You Teach the Machines is hosted and produced by me, Jeff Pennington, and co-hosted by my daughter, MJ. Please take a minute to review and subscribe to You Teach the Machines wherever fine podcasts are downloaded. Copyright 2025. Any and all use of the audio recording of You Teach the Machines for training or other contribution to artificial intelligence models or their application is expressly forbidden without the permission of the creator. And we'd love to give you permission, so long as you come on the show.
Proof you was gone.